Okay,
Like we're on?
we're on.
Okay, good evening. This is, whatever day this is.
Good night.
January 9th, 2020 at about 7:04. And this is the first joint meeting of the Southampton Planning Board and the Southampton Master Plan Implementation Committee. And the Housing Committee representative is arriving. Perfect. Come in, Ian. Come on in. Pick a chair.
Pick a chair.
Anywhere.
How about a green chair?
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, we can move
Yeah, we have-
this out because now we know we're not getting any more.
I don't think we'll have another.
I'm just in a green mood tonight.
Good. Art?
Art is as well.
Yeah.
You wanted to just match the presentation.
Yeah, exactly. So Jim Senior is our housing rep. Jim, do you know Paul and Paul?
I do not.
Nice to meet you, Jim. Paul from Planning Board, Paul Damon, and
Oh,
Paul
Paul, I've seen your name. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good. So we're just getting started. So as I was saying, this is our first joint meeting, and this has come about basically after Mike Rosenberg, who's the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, did a presentation on the Master Plan Committee's work to the Select Board back at the end of November. Just for everybody's recollection, the Master Plan Implementation Committee started about a year ago, and we spent literally the entire year going through chapter by chapter, so 8 chapters of the Master Plan that was written several years ago, and we spent probably close to a month, so 2 meetings at least, probably on each of the chapters, trying to understand what was written, what was intended maybe, taking a look at some of the realities of the goals and strategies that were put out at the time. Each of the chapters have lengthy ideas in terms of strategies and possible goals, and some of them had some time frames attached to them that were already bypassed. They had not happened in the last 3 to 5 years, and so that was very much outdated. And so we were looking at ones that then still were somewhat relevant. So by the time we got through all of our review of our chapters, we spent time looking again at the goals and objectives and tried to narrow some of those down to what we thought were the most relevant and the most doable, because some things seem to be not only out of reach but also just not relevant to the context. There's a little bit in here that seems to be a little, what shall I say, not exactly appropriate for Southampton. It could apply to other locations maybe, and not so much our particular area. So we spent time kind of narrowing down what we thought would be priority goals and some strategies to work on, with the intent of presenting that to Select Board, which Mike did at the end of November. And then based on that, there was a desire to say, look, let's see how we can put some meat on the bones and actually get some action going, that it's not just yet, again, a document that sits on the shelf for another 5 years, but we try to actualize it. And I know there's been various people in and out of the Master Plan Committee at one point in time. It started, it stopped, and so this is hopefully to try and keep the momentum going. And as we went through the various chapters, it seemed to be that a lot of the tasks ahead were not only tied into Select Board, but a lot were tied into planning, and some into housing, some into open space as well. So we thought out of all the chapters, we might just try and see what we could tackle tonight with the first 2 chapters, which is, I believe the first one is demographics and housing, and the second one is economic development. So that's what we kind of wanted to do, to have our first meeting. And again, with the idea to see how we all might be on the same wavelength in terms of what is the reality of some of the priorities that we could have here in town, and help us sort of chart a path forward. I think for the Select Board is looking, they're looking to sort of put forth sort of a priority action plan for the next couple of years for the town, to see where we're going. We keep talking about development, we keep talking about lots of things, but we never really have a committed effort to making it happen. So the intent, I think, is to try and actualize whatever we can out of the master plan, and try to make it a reality, and put some relative timeframes on it, figure out what we might be able to do in-house somehow with our existing resources, whether we need to bring in other resources from PVPC or other places. And so that's the kind of thing I thought we might have a discussion about tonight. I'm not sure if anybody has any particular other goals. Like I say, kind of landed in my lap a little bit at the last minute because Mike was going to be chairing this, but I think this is pretty much what he was intending to do as well. So does anybody want to add anything to that? Or I don't know if you guys have had much chance to be familiar with the work of the master plan over the last bit. And
I will
know
say
you've
I've
been filling
attempted
people
to
in.
give them some reports, and I've raised questions, and they were extremely helpful several meetings back with giving me some updates. Some of it, to be honest with you, I wanted to have you get directly from
Sure.
them.
Yep.
Because they're more experienced, more expert in many ways than I on some of the stuff. So that's,
Well, and I think-
it's not brand new to them.
Sure.
Have
No,
either
that's
of you
Yeah.
ever read the master plan or had familiarity going back to it?
Going back when, yeah.
Well, when it was, when it was brought about 4, 5, 6 years ago,
2013, yeah.
but nothing had ever come from the master plan committee after that. They had met, but
Right.
action plans were few and far between.
Right.
The only thing we've worked on is, we're still revamping the bylaw.
Yeah.
We're starting our 3rd year on it. It's not an easy process.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, and I think that's part of our challenge too, is to figure out what things are actually taking place, and where can we also kind of help each other out with information and/or resources if we have some internally that have some skills, or that we might need to bring in people. I know, Jim, you were actually at the select board meeting, and some questions came up about affordable housing and the definition about that, and how that's determined with the median income and so forth. And so I think part of this meeting for us too, because we're not certainly on the planning side of things and familiar with a lot of the zoning bylaws and other things that you all go through. So I think I kind of see this as a bit of an education session for us tonight too, to understand, some of the challenges that maybe you're going through on the planning board in terms of trying to respond to needs of people, or businesses maybe wanting to come to town, or the kinds of housing developments that are being brought forth before the planning board. So I think that's the idea. Francine?
Yeah, I just want to add that the Master Plan Implementation Committee is basically a facilitator. They were not
Right.
charged in the master plan with doing anything other than bringing people together and getting everyone on the same page and
Right.
helping move this forward. Because the expertise really lies within the committees
Correct.
that are charged with, that were identified in the master plan for these different areas. So we're not expert in housing
Right.
or transportation or mobility or any of the things. I mean, Christina was on the master plan
The original.
committee,
The original.
the original one that developed this document. So you want to have anything to say about from there to then to now?
Well, it was written, paid for, and then pretty much shelved. That is one of my basic difficulties with it. So hopefully, and all of the 1 to 5 year old or the short-term plans
Long gone.
have to be reconsidered
Right.
as to whether they can now
They're
be
way
implemented.
Can I just ask, do you folks have this by any chance? I mean, they're just a summary sheet of the goals and the strategies?
I've got a plan that was developed years ago. We had a whole
I mean, because
We could-
I can try to make
I've got
copies.
one copy with me. I could share it.
Well, it was emailed around to them from
Yeah, but I mean,
Mike.
But I mean, if you wanted
Okay,
to,
all
If
right.
you want to see a hard
but that's just a
copy.
hard copy if you wanted to have that.
Okay, that's good.
But
The biggest issue I've seen that I can think of, we addressed the affordable housing thing in the bylaw. That was not acceptable, obviously. The bylaw was written because of at the time, the housing partnership was on a push for it. So we got it done.
was this the inclusionary one? or
The
is that-
inclusion
Yeah.
of the zoning. And
Okay.
it was not anywhere near perfect, and our consultant today, Larry Smith from PVPC, who's now
Yeah.
retired, but he's with us privately,
Yeah.
it's a disaster.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if many of you folks were around when the public hearing was on for that, but developers, builders came out en masse for that. It was a big meeting, there was a lot of discussion, and even today, in the most prominent voice we have on the ZBA, Ryan Gielaher, who was also a developer, will tell you that that's why everybody that's building a subdivision is coming in with 9 units and
Right,
not 10.
instead of 10.
They cannot make any money on it.
Yeah,
So it just goes to show you how archaic and
Right.
non-profitable.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense on paper, and philosophically, everybody's on board with it. But try to get someone to build it.
uh-huh. Try to implement it, yeah.
So you forwarded that notice of a meeting that you forwarded to me, I sent it to Jim, a meeting that would be developers and planners and
The training you're
municipalities,
talking
the
about in
training
March.
on utilizing the CPA funds and working on exclusionary housing, that's the end of March. I don't know if you're going to tell us anything that we don't know or have any
Yeah.
brilliant ideas,
I
but...
hope to go because
Yeah.
I'm curious enough to know
Yeah.
more.
Well, let's kind of maybe get into this. Maybe just start here if we can all gather. This was,
You want to start at the beginning
well,
of
just-
the vision,
just-
or start it right at chapter 1?
I think we can just start at chapter 1. I mean,
Okay.
this was the housing and demographics. Is that big enough? We can make it a little bigger? Is that readable for
You want it
everybody?
bigger?
Can make it a tad bigger if you want.
Okay.
Maybe
We still have it on the screen?
Yeah, I think that works. We'll just shift it to the right a tad. And then you got it. So up top were essentially the three or so goals. So create affordable housing opportunities through bylaw review, revision, and implementation. Attention needs to be put on creating opportunities in Southampton, including that active encouragement of both developers and builders, and then create opportunities for first-time home buyers and individuals who work in Southampton. I think one of the issues in sort of, I won't say it's really a complaint, but a comment that we've had anyway, there are so many people that work in town, from our teachers to our firefighters to our
Town hall staff?
our town hall staff, some of the EMTs, various others in town that would love to live here because they work here, but they can't afford a place to live. And so it just seems to be a drumbeat that's gotten a little bit louder over the last few months of, affordable housing is an issue. It's an issue not only for seniors, but it's an issue for first-time home buyers as well. People that have had to probably leave town and go elsewhere to buy a house because they can't afford it in town, or seniors that have lived here for a number of years, and as they downsize and can't manage a large property anymore, there's very few places for them to go as well. So I think, the goal is to try and see what we can do to be creative and provide those opportunities. I think we do need to, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but there was the magical statistic, are we not supposed to have something like 10% of our community with affordable housing when I don't know if we're even at 1%, are we? I don't think, right? Yeah, we're nowhere near it. And I'm not saying that 10% is realistic. I mean, that may be a, pie in the sky kind of goal, but we're not even knowing that we're making any progress toward it. And I think part of the goal of what we've done with the master plan, and hopefully in conjunction with planning and others, we can try and find a way to thread the needle and make something that is not so useless in terms of practicality. I mean, if it's good on paper, but it doesn't have any way to get implemented, then it may as well just be nothing. So we've got to do something to figure out how to avoid those kinds of things. So those were the overall goals. If anybody has any comments about those, do we kind of agree that those are all things that we would like to achieve as the town of Southampton? Or Paul, feel free to jump in.
Absolutely. I think they're fantastic goals. I think one of the bigger issues we have is infrastructure.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that's something that is not really conducive to affordable housing and the way that we operate as a rural community. And one of the biggest issues we have is lack of sewer. I think that's a very challenging hurdle for developers to overcome, particularly if there's multi-unit.
Right, I was going to say, does that apply mostly to multifamily units, or is that?
Either way, I mean, it also goes back to the economic growth, but in terms of housing, if we just keep on housing, that is a challenge. It's not something that is easily handled by, shared septic systems and things of that nature, but
Right.
I think that's a hurdle that, it's nice for us to have all these goals and vision, but something's got to come first.
Right.
It's the chicken or the egg
Yeah,
idea that
what has to be done to help facilitate and open the door to make
Right.
all that happen. Yeah, exactly.
Well, we had an interesting presentation, I don't know if anyone had a chance to see it, from a company that did like mini sewer systems. for towns like us where we can't afford the millions and millions to do it town-wide. But in areas where we would want to develop, multiple housing units, or an apartment building, whatever, that might be a solution. The cost, it's not inexpensive, but, looking at how we might work with a developer on that funding side of that piece that would solve a problem for them and maybe make it less costly for them to build. I don't know, we have to think of some
So,
creative ways.
I mean, what happens now with like some of the housing developments that are coming in, that have been approved lately? Those are all, are they septic systems or they're
They're all septic.
Single-family.
single-family septic systems?
I guess
Yeah.
what I'm dancing around is the idea of trying to leverage other funding opportunities
Yeah.
that are somewhat geared to infrastructure improvements that can be
Yeah.
leveraged with housing.
Uh-huh.
It's easy for me to say, but I'm just going to throw out some ideas.
Sure.
There's community block grants. I know that's more for disadvantaged communities. That's not what we are, but there's other opportunities like MassWorks where there are rural community funds
Right.
that are in there that might be potentially used for not so much economic development, but for rural community benefits per se, where if we can somewhat demonstrate that this is going to be a benefit. See, for us, it's difficult because the easiest low-hanging fruit would be to say, well, let's build something closer to Westfield or Easthampton or somewhere where we can tie into a sewer,
Yeah.
right? Maybe, maybe we have various goals that look at the short term and long term, where maybe we utilize the easier parts of town that can be connected
Yeah.
to a neighboring community to promote development on the Westfield line or on the Easthampton line. I doubt the Holyoke line would work because of the grades, but maybe we have short-term and long-term goals, because in reality, it's maybe a 5-year plan versus, or maybe have a 15-year plan, because that's something that
Yeah.
takes a
Well,
long time.
that was the challenge with, I think, the master plan itself, right, was a 15-year plan, and we've spent 5 years with doing nothing, so we're really trying to catch up and figure out how we can really put a stake in the ground and really start doing something, and try to find whatever that low-hanging fruit is, so that we can say, hey, look, we've made a stamp, we've done something, we are taking actual steps, so that we can then have some experience and some track record that we can go outside to, MassWorks or some of these other, possible funding places and say, hey, look, we are making progress, join in with us to help, make this
Is
go
that really
forward.
low-hanging fruit, though? How
Well,
hard-
I don't know that per se,
I'm
but I
looking at
mean-
you. How hard would it be to have some kind of development happen closer to Easthampton or Westfield, do you think?
Well,
And would a developer come in and want to do it?
we have to incentivize it somehow,
And
right?
how would we incentivize it? Through these grants? Is that what you're
Well, it's more than that. I mean, I think we would have to somewhat demonstrate to the state, if we're going after a MassWorks grant, saying that, hey, we have this opportunity for affordable housing in this part of town. However, we have, in order to make this happen, we need to tie into, let's say, Westfield's sewer system. And that's going to result in a sewer main, or a pump station or sewer main that's going to have to run 2,000 feet to connect to Falcon Drive or somewhere, wherever their sewer ends in town.
How far does the sewer come up from Westfield? Where does it?
I think it stops right around
Valley
Falcon
Road?
Drive. It's just south of, I think it stops just south of Cumberland Farms.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's in Westfield, though.
Oh, still on the Westfield side?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in one.
Cumberland Farms doesn't have part of the public sewer system.
I don't think so. I think they have a water main that was recently brought up and takes a left to go down north towards the
Yeah,
LDB.
toward Roots and all that, the Armbrook and all that.
Armbrook, yeah.
Armbrook, right.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ever did the sewer there. I'm pretty sure they didn't do the sewer.
Several years ago, when we were working on the Smart Growth District, PC was helping us with, we started at the Easthampton line over here on Route 10, big white plaza down toward Pure Food area.
Yeah.
And even beyond, stopped cold in its tracks because of the lack of infrastructure. We got everywhere about building heights, 2- and 3-story buildings with mixed use, sidewalks, this, that, and the other thing. They hit a brick wall because of the infrastructure. But it was never gone any further than that because what entity in the town hall here has to make the next move to the city of Easthampton is saying, are you willing to accept sewer from Southampton? And if so, how far, whatever. There's no planning department in this town.
Right.
Planning board is volunteers like you.
Sure.
So we don't have staff that can be grant writers or to make the telephone calls or to be the catalyst to get
Right.
things moving. And
Yeah.
that's why you're behind 5 years on this master plan, because there's nobody that's taking the bull by the horns on it.
Yeah. And Easthampton has a town planner, do they not?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
So,
And staff.
Jeff Bag, talked to him yesterday.
yeah. Yeah.
Just think about low-hanging fruit. I think it's a matter of, and I'm just talking big picture, not saying this is our approach, but it's basically strategically identifying locations in town.
Locations in town.
that are relatively close to our neighboring communities that are able to interconnect to their
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah. Do we have a sense of that? I mean, could we brainstorm some of that? Do we have a sense of what those areas might be? We can.
So here's one question. What about this whole thing about the developer that came, did the public hearing, wanted to build a Dunkin' Donut in the grassy area next to the restaurant? It's currently zoned residential, hasn't been a zoning change. They own it. They said, whether they said it realistically or not, well, we'll just build something else there, which would have to be residential unless there's a zoning
right.
change. Is that a realistic site for some kind of affordable housing project?
How big was the area? Was it?
I don't know exactly, what was the acreage?
It's not big.
Not much.
It could be.
Couple acres.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, no,
like-
yeah, right, yeah.
You know,
Beyond
I can't
couple
remember the
acres.
name, it was just sold, that was the housing complex behind Paisanos,
Yeah.
the apartments in there.
Yeah.
Now, they've got their own on-site sewer system, septic sewer
Okay.
system. Brian Gallagher explained it to us at one meeting,
Uh-huh.
because of all the units there, and it's very costly, and they have to have it pumped constantly or maintained, but it's doable, but it's a costly
Yeah.
investment for whomever's going to do it.
Yeah.
There is like close to $400,000 in the CPA line
Correct.
item for affordable housing. I just,
There is.
pardon me?
Yeah.
About 360, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Like,
But yeah,
it's a new year,
Yeah.
so there might be a little more coming in.
Might be a little more. But no, that's true. I mean, and that is one of the thoughts that we've had in our discussions is that community preservation does have, one of their arms of what they can put money toward is affordable housing. And it's something where if they've dabbed into it, it's been very minimal. It's been more like some improvements, I think, for folks that need handicap walkways and things like
keep
that. but it's
people
not
in
been-
their homes
To keep people
rather
in their
than-
homes, but not any real,
And it's not coming out of that line item, it's coming,
that's coming out of something else,
it's coming out of
right?
the almonds.
Right, and so I think, there is money there if we could figure out how to access it. And I think other towns have done it through rental properties, not just buying a new house or looking at houses that are coming up for sale. We've talked in the committee here, I think, a bit about some of the older, smaller houses, more the Mountain View Circle type houses that have been around for years and years that are not extraordinarily expensive, and they would be fine for,
But I brought that up to the planning board,
Yeah.
and they pointed out you can't have a really small lot and have a private sewer system. You have to have the larger lot.
but what do they have
Isn't that-
there
isn't that
at Mountain View? What
It
do
was
they have there?
explained to me
What do they
that the
have?
lots
Actually,
have
I
to
just
be
looked
allowed
into
to.
a house on Mountain View and it has its own septic.
Each
And
one.
is it a small, does it meet our criteria for lot size on the Mountain View lots? Do we know that? Are they smaller than our current criteria for a
They might
single-family
be, I mean,
home?
they've been around for a number of years, so chances are they are.
They've been around for a while.
They've been around for a long time. But I mean,
they don't have 140 feet of frontage.
Yeah, they don't.
no, but I mean,
It's
would
not
that,
140.
but could that not be
It's 40.
something?
When you talk about small lot sizes too, that was part of the carrot and stick approach you were giving to developers for inclusionary zoning in a subdivision, saying if you include, say you had 10 plus lots or whatever the equation was, if you include affordable housing in this project, then we will allow you more units because we're going to reduce the lot sizes from the standard zoning as a incentive for you to build these over here. So they could get, and that was the thinking, that if we gave them more lots and more, it would make up for the difference for the affordable, and that still didn't wash it.
And what was their answer?
It still wasn't
And
enough.
I heard, what's his name, Rob, who am I thinking of? The developer that comes up from Westfield, Rob
Levex.
Levette. He said that they're afraid they can't sell the houses if there's something less than a big, beautiful house in the same
Well,
development.
that's the stigmatism that's been.
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't the idea, I thought the idea of the inclusionary housing was that from the outside, from the exterior, nothing was supposed to look any different than anything.
Yeah, I look at that whole
else,
Village Hill
right?
section
Yeah.
of Northampton, and it's all,
But Hospital Hill,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
but it's all very different housing. You have big individual homes with apartments, and some are subsidized housing, and some are just regular, and then there's also an area in Easthampton.
The
like
bungalows,
off of
too.
Button. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I wonder how did they do it? I mean,
So-
they got integration there. People obviously have very different
We got a lot of
needs.
state
So-
funds to work with on that too. That was a big project.
Hospital Hill, I actually worked in Hospital Hill at my past employer, and that was a planned community, that was a former state property, right? So they had
Yeah.
involvement from Mass Development, that's a quasi-public agency that helps promote economic growth. However, you're talking about Northampton that has the infrastructure, that has the space, that has the drive, that
And
has
the professional planners.
Right, they have Wayne Feig and others in town to promote that type of development and draw, and that's where we're lacking, is we don't have that.
This article, I don't know if anybody saw it, because it was in a couple of days ago about Amherst on Northampton Street, which is Route 9. The affordable project that they're putting up, and it's an interesting concept, and it made me think of Southampton. It's a community, it's got 28 apartments, and it would consist of 8 reserved for those making $31,000 or less, 8 reserved for those making $49,000 or less, 10 reserved for those making $18,650 or less, and for a preference for the homeless, and 2 reserved for those making $18,000 or less who are clients of the Department of Mental Health. And each unit, they're studio units, 240 square feet.
Wow.
So there's a complex that they're working on with Valley Community Development.
Is that the one in North Amherst?
Thank you. Yeah.
No, it's right in
Good job. Thank you.
Northampton
I
Street
didn't see this,
in
yeah.
Amherst. But it's something to think about, that
Right.
this is a unit, a complex that's on its own. It's not houses in a subdivision.
Sure, yeah.
It's, if you want to, the thought I had when I read it, I said, well, geez, if we can't get anywhere making affordable housing in subdivisions, single-family units, then you might want
Yeah.
to go to a
Multi-unit.
multi-unit, but
Yeah.
again,
You need
you've got
land.
the infrastructure and land to do so.
So one of the things that I think we're lacking is obviously a planner, somebody that understands the funding opportunities that are out
Right.
there. I'm sure PVPC has an individual that we can look into to see, and maybe an action item as a short term to help us identify funding opportunities, or
Right.
I'll tell you what, there's communities across the state, I'll give you an example, like Winchendon or Southwick, that are able to grasp community development block grants to help improve infrastructure and promote
Yep.
development in low-income areas. And obviously, that's geared towards lower-income areas, but maybe there's something that we would be able to qualify as the town to promote that. Maybe there's some thresholds that we can meet. However, I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
There are these professionals at PVPC that might be able to help us.
Need people to do that. So we'll come back to that in a sec, because we've got maybe a thought on that with something that's come up recently. But just to kind of go through the strategies a little bit, just because I know you've said at some point in time you've been working on your bylaws and so forth. So, for example, one of these early strategies under this was to amend the cluster bylaw. Let's see. So the Smart Growth Technical Assistance Grant kind of happened, but then nothing was able to come of it. So we've kind of been through that route before. Is that worth trying to pursue again? A smart growth approach, is that something worth trying to approach again somehow or another?
I think once again, that's geared towards the infrastructure as well.
Okay, it's all tied in.
So that's all
Yeah.
interlocked.
Yeah. Okay, well,
So there's a common denominator that we're
yeah, okay,
dealing with.
yeah. So what about the cluster bylaw? Is that actually something that you find workable now, or it's something you're working on to revise, or what are the weak points of it, if it is a weak point?
Well, the cluster bylaw is in
Is that the-
subdivision regs.
It's a 30 acre one at least, or something, is it not? Or cluster is at least 30 acres, is it not?
I
think
don't have
something
the
like that.
regs in front of me,
But-
but that's under the subdivision rules and regs that we have, and we're not addressing that right now, we're addressing the regular bylaws.
Okay, regular
The
bylaws.
subdivision regulations could be amended, provided somebody comes forth with an idea or a concept that is viable. Because any of these ideas that you want to implement that are going to come before if the planning board has got to take the action on them,
Right.
somebody's got to come up with the idea,
Yep.
write the plan, so to speak. It has to go to select board that will pass it on to us when we set a public hearing.
Right.
And from that, either it's made by law or it's not.
Uh-huh.
And eventually the town votes out of the town meeting anyway.
Right, sure.
So if we shoot it down because it doesn't have all the criteria necessary, or it's not going to stick, then it goes nowhere. But if we approve it, then it goes to the town meeting,
Right.
and it then has to be approved from there.
Sure.
In order to get rewritten.
Okay. I'm not sure what, this was just out of these strategies that we had picked out as priorities. Sorry, this is one that had existed these are ones that came from the plan itself, obviously. So thinking that the existing cluster bylaw was maybe not, or could be something to be looked at to maybe be sure that its language was encouraging enough for bringing in other housing opportunities that would be different than just, our usual, maybe different than our single-family homes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the reconsider the proposed open space residential development bylaw, and so that's the one that was probably part of the smart growth one, apparently, the way it's listed anyway in the book here. So those were two that had been mentioned from the plan. The definition, and maybe Jim, you can speak to this a little bit, the definition of the elderly housing, that was one that had been, totally undefined, I think, in the master plan in terms of what does it mean to have, affordable housing. Is it necessarily elderly housing? I personally don't think it is exclusively,
Right.
and yet nobody had ever really defined what elderly housing meant, I think, at one point in
It's
time.
probably more 55 and over community, right?
Right, so, and those are often developed privately, but my understanding of, affordable housing usually involves federal or state dollars, and once you do that, then you can't segregate populations.
Yeah.
So you make it open to all.
Uh-huh.
So the desire to have more affordable housing for our seniors in town, I think, is a good goal, but it's going to be a bigger ask when you start looking at the federal options that are available to support that, like through vouchers and stuff. Talking about rental units, for example, or building affordable units have to meet certain criteria, and then you can't necessarily build an affordable home for someone to purchase, say, okay, now it's yours.
Right.
There's a bidding process, I believe,
Yeah,
that goes into
yeah.
the pool, so.
And does it not have a lien on it as well? I mean, it stays...
It does.
Yeah, so it's got to be, as it's sold, as the property is sold, it stays with it?
That's my understanding, yeah.
And so people have to be evaluated, their financial picture has to be
I believe
evaluated.
I
at
believe
the time
anybody
of the
coming into
fall.
that have to bring in X number of years of taxes and so forth to be evaluated, to be sure that they're within, I think as we had talked about it that night at Select Board, it was something like 80% of the median income of the Springfield, greater Springfield
Right,
area or
it's
something?
the-
Is it not?
It's, HUD sets it as
HUD.
Springfield,
Yeah.
and so the AMI is just at 80%.
Right. So there's something about that somebody would have to qualify, but you've got to bring in proof that you're eligible to be one of those possible tenants, I guess.
And part of what I recall our consultant saying is, who is going to do the monitoring of that? I mean, it can't be one of our volunteer board.
It's a big deal. That's a huge
Yes,
thing.
yes.
That's your housing trust fund or the housing authority or
Yeah.
your partnership. Yes.
Well, so we just met as a housing authority, and we had a call in from the Acton Housing Authority because I went to a training on overlay districts and the advantage of those. And in this training, most of the overlay districts focused on, keeping a historical nature in town or a certain rural aspect. But there was one town that used overlay districts successfully to increase affordable housing, and that was the town of Acton. So that's what they called us. Well, as you say, one of the themes I'm hearing is that these towns are a little bit bigger, and they have, like Easthampton, Northampton, active, whether it's a planning board or a city planner, or they have a housing authority board, and we don't have any of that. So when you try to operate as a volunteer board, meeting in the evenings,
Sure.
you don't have anybody to administer
Right.
these kind of things. They have to be administered
We don't
professionally.
have an infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that any of these supports on a regional basis could be made
So
available?
you could, one of the things that was suggested to us, for example, there are local housing authorities. Like Northampton has a big housing authority. I deal with them frequently in my work. And they could possibly be interested in helping to, manage as far as who's going to manage the voucher, for example, if it were a voucher for the Section 8 voucher, for example, they could help manage that. Or there's Wayfinders in Springfield, they're DHCD. So there's possibility to do some of that kind of regionalizing. It's not really regionalizing as in the traditional sense. It's not like regionalizing a DPW or regionalizing a school district. It's basically taking an existing entity, a housing authority from a larger town and saying, hey, can you help us out over here?
But Chris and I went to a roundtable luncheon at PVPC a month or two ago, and one of the things they talked about was the sharing of resources up, for example, a town accountant. This is not what we're talking about, but they hire a professional accountant who is essentially a consultant, but that individual or that firm manages multiple small towns, therefore the town doesn't have to hire a full-time
Yeah.
accountant.
So there's
And there were
opportunities for
others as
shared
well.
municipal services,
And I
Right.
wonder if that's
I
essentially
think
what we're
there
talking about
is.
here.
I think it's going to take, again, some work, but
Yeah.
we're not the only town with this.
No.
Any
Right.
town who bordered us, you have the Hoyokes and the Westfields,
Sure.
but at the other end, you have Westhampton, Huntington,
Montgomery,
Chesterfield.
all of
They're all in
yeah.
the same position we are
Yeah.
as far as trying to
They
create
absolutely are.
affordable housing.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
really a struggle.
Yeah, and a lot of the hill towns are, trying to figure out just sharing just basic services from police to dispatch to fire to ambulance to whatever else. I mean, we're lucky to have what we have comparatively to some of the other towns around us. So, but okay, well, I want to come back to that before we forget that Delta thing. Just to go through just a couple others were identifying the suitable property for the development, so we might come back and talk about that in a second. And I guess I don't know, has anything ever been talked about this local land trust or establishing a housing trust? Did anybody ever talk to us about doing that? Because I gather that would be part of, something that could help us to actually purchase some property and
Incentivized.
So that's a really good
do
question.
some
So
things like that?
the Acton point of contact, the head of the housing authority there, one of the members, is going to send us some contacts to explore that, because they did they did do that. Now, the Housing Authority Board here previously had said they looked at that and was very discouraged in doing that. There was liability in the town owning property and et cetera. It was very worrisome. Yet I keep hearing examples where other towns do just that. They buy properties,
Yeah.
they end up,
The town ends up
renting
being
them.
the landlord, though.
Well, as an
That's the issue,
enterprise, right, so
Yeah.
there's a clear, so they set up a
Kind of standalone.
kind of a firewall per se, as an enterprise that's standalone from the town
Yeah.
Right.
government, right?
Hence the
That's
trust
that's the
aspect.
mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, but I think where the rubber meets the road on this one is these other towns that are doing this, again, have a board that's actually a paid board that administers it versus volunteer. But we're back to the same theme again, with the small
Yeah.
town struggle, where, like Cindy said, where pooling with several towns might
yeah,
overcome that.
yeah.
Because you have several towns, therefore you could have maybe a paid person who represents a region. You'd have to put money into that, though, even if it's pooling.
Right.
Sure.
Right now, the money is zero because
Yeah.
we're volunteers.
So what's the pooling cost versus just throwing out there like PVPC? I mean, that's,
Right.
what's the cost benefit?
Say that again?
You hiring PVPC, I know that, you're probably paying $80 an hour versus putting somebody on town benefits and sharing the cost with others.
Yeah, well, they weren't, the way we understood it, they were not actually the ones that provided the service. They were just the facilitators, that these were other independent firms, depending on what the circumstance was. So there was no facilitation cost at all. It was just a case of, I use the example of the town accountant. So if, the town accountant, if the accounting services came to 300 hours over the course of the entire year, then you just pay the per cost, but you're not paying any benefits, and you're not paying any.
So,
So you're purchasing the service.
Correct. For example, there was she's talking about, there was a CPA that was hired, a contract was awarded to some CPA firm, and he and his staff provide services to the towns of Blandford, Chesterfield, Goshen, Brookfield, and Monterey.
Right. Another
And that's the
example,
accountant for those
was the fact that some towns
Yeah,
spend
so-
tons of money. We know that our town is spending a lot of money to buy this big, heavy equipment. And guess what? You don't plow streets except for how many months a year? The rest of the time, some of that equipment, that's not a great example because they use it for other things too. But, it's all this idea of shared resources between towns
Yeah.
and even a police chief, I think in one of the examples
Yeah, I
was
think,
they were sharing.
Chester, right?
Chester and Blandford, I think, are
Yeah.
sharing a police chief now.
But back to the housing thing,
right, so PVPC is not the only vendor. So to your
No.
point, there's
So that's-
people out there, consultants who may be willing to be hired privately, and you work as a pool of towns to look at that. There's Hilltown, CDC, there's different organizations to
Yeah.
potentially look at just that if you're trying to get creative.
I was throwing out PVPC because they tend to be cheaper than others.
Yeah,
That's why I was,
yeah.
Dave, even Easthampton planning department, would they,
oh, they're overwhelmed.
they're overwhelmed now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I deal with them on a regular basis, and they have their own, I'm getting emails from the planner at 11 o'clock at night. So, that's not happening.
Stretched, yeah.
They're stretched.
One of the things, just to circuit back around, there is, and it's got a very short deadline, but it's PVPC. There's the
DLTA.
DLTA, the Technical Assistance, sort of a planning grant opportunity,
Right.
apparently through PVPC. The deadline, we heard about like maybe a week ago.
well, I'll just put it on our
Oh, great.
agenda.
Well, the
right?
deadline was the 17th, so it was a
It's now
crazy
the
deadline. Now the
24th.
24th, I think, so they've extended it a week. But that's the idea too, and I brought it up at Select Board, and Ed said he would look into it, but I'm sure he hasn't had a chance. And I don't know that we would,
I have the
again,
paperwork, and we're going to discuss it at our meeting.
Great.
What, if anything, we want them to do. And
Yeah.
I think they only give,
I think only
town only
one.
one.
Exactly, yeah.
so if someone looks over the list, did you get the email on it?
I did get the email, and
Did you
it
see the
talks
list of?
what they've funded in the past, our senior.
Yeah, and if there's some area there that you think you might need, because we were going to discuss it and have them do something for us, but if there's something that's
Yeah.
more important to the master plan, then we could redirect it that way.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, it came in just recently, actually. I mean, these crazy things, again, with towns with all of our volunteer people, I mean, to give such short notice, I don't know why it has to be quite so
Well,
quick that they turn these things around.
Not to try to look into it now, but review it, and if you or someone sends a memo or come to the meeting next Wednesday,
Okay.
and
Next
if you
Wednesday.
want something to be done with that for master plan, we can discuss it, and I can fill out the paperwork and submit it.
Okay.
Have you done that before? Have you filled out the paperwork so it's not that onerous? It's something you
No,
think?
it's
That's
only a
great, Paul.
two-page.
Well, that'd be great.
Application,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
They only have, like, remember when Larry was talking the last time that it's a great program, but they don't give you a lot of hours.
Yeah.
They get you started, so to speak, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
dropped because
Drug dealer.
Yeah.
they probably, give you some guidance, but.
Well, we've run into that in our town because the DLTA for 2019 was applied to the revival, the revision, the renewal of our master, what is it called? Open Space and Recreation Plan. And this terrific person, Emily Slotnick, came,
Right.
started the whole thing, and her time ended
Right.
December 31.
That's what
And
Larry
it's
was
not done
referring
yet.
to. They don't allow enough funding toward it.
However, we do have some supplement, and one of the grants that Ed applied for,
The MVP?
the MVP grant, there
Yeah, I
is,
saw that.
They said we could use it.
yeah, there's a total of $25,000 that's been, it's not officially awarded yet, but it looks like we're getting the 22,000, of which 7,000 had been put aside as I want to say, it's not a supplement, an expanded scope.
Yep.
And that was specifically to work on different aspects of finalizing the plan. So that should be able to be funded enough to get that update done, from what I understand anyway.
No, that's that particular thing, but like
Right.
what Paul said, we
Yeah.
gotta come up with what we can
Right.
use for us.
So that's something we could, I don't know, I'll have to find that email. But I passed it on to Ed, I think. But I think, it seems like there's not a lot of money, I'm sure, from the DLTA, but I mean, if it's a shame to let money disappear if there's a chance out there, if there's some TA, and it's so hard to get money for planning in general, usually. I mean, in my experience with government,
I think there's just a pool of money they have out there,
Yeah.
and it's available to all these communities, but they don't give it to everybody.
Right.
They select for some reason or other, and I don't know how the selection
how the process goes, yeah.
Everybody can apply
Yeah.
for it if they
Yeah.
wish, but
Yeah, but I know that day when we were there, we met that Patty, what was her name?
Patty
Gambarini or whatever, and she just offered assistance if we ever needed anything for town. So maybe we can put our heads together on that. But you guys are meeting again on Wednesday, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Could the money that CPC has in this affordable housing category, could any of that ever be used to hire a grant writer or a planner or somebody to help
That might
us
be
move
a
this thing
that might
along?
be
Or
a
does it have to be, is it
stretch.
restricted to exactly?
We need a Virginia here to tell you whether that's
Yeah.
reasonable, and he's saying it's,
Actually, I think it is.
I'm not sure.
Well, I feel optimistic that it is because from other opportunities, I was talking to Ed about the Greenway, that they might be able to fund the consultant fees for the design of it, potentially. So I don't see that being any different than,
Because, I
Other
mean,
TA.
it sounds like we really just need, not only just
No.
to start,
But-
but we need to start. And
Yeah.
right now, we don't have
Right.
in our toolbox what we need to start.
Yeah. I know Virginia has said that, we can use CPC funds to help purchase a house, I believe.
Right.
And to also, what's the right word? Work in partnership with like Habitat for Humanity or something like
Refurbish the
that.
house or something.
Refurbish a house, those kinds of
But-
things,
the-
as well as rentals.
once again, the idea there is we need an administrator, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the trouble. You need
That's
somebody
the-
kind of daily in charge to watch what's
Right.
going on and make it all happen.
That's
I
the
mean, that-
full-time employee that we do not have.
Exactly. That is true. That is true. So, but I mean, being able to have some sort of a resource that could come and, spend a few sessions with us and talk us through what other towns are really doing and,
So why don't we put that as a goal?
yeah.
what? Say it again. What goal?
Hiring an administrator to implement I don't want to say implement these goals, but that's why we're here.
Manage this fund?
Well, here's the thing. It seems like we need somebody to put the pieces of the puzzle together,
Yeah.
right? You know, you need somebody that could be a grant writer, right, to help us look for opportunities that are out there from the state for certain housing or certain infrastructure, things of that nature. If we're, for example, let's say we were looking to buy a house or something, it's something that what town entity would be able to manage that house, right? So who would be responsible for that operation and maintenance of that particular property that we would own,
Yeah,
right?
and that goes into maybe this idea of the trust fund, right? In terms of
Right,
being
if you have a trust, someone needs to administer the trust.
Right, who's the administrator?
Right.
Yeah, okay, that too.
So we're
I
talking
think
about
that
a real, sorry.
When we were reviewing this whole master plan, I
Yeah.
think what we found, there were lots of silos. So multiple committees had responsibilities in each of these chapters, and there was no mechanism to bring them all together. So whoever this person might be would be kind of the convener, implementer, driver, I guess, is how I would envision this
It's a
person.
real hybrid individual who could wear 3 or 4 different hats, write grants, facilitate, administer housing issues. I happen to know there's a conservation issue. We don't have an agent that, I don't know if that could be
Yeah,
a hat they wear.
I know, it's all.
So I know communities, once again, like I said, Winchendon, they have a grant administrator. Their job is just to see what opportunities there are. Other communities, that's maybe the role of a town planner.
Yeah. Is that a full-time thing in Winchendon?
Yes, well, Winchendon, yes, it was. I don't know if it is
Okay.
now, but
Yeah, I mean, that is true, though. I mean, there's money out there at state levels and federal levels, and, you have time, if you do know about it or you find out about it, the deadline is so short, you don't have time to really develop a decent proposal. And
At
so,
one time,
having-
we had the offer from someone who
Somebody
would be
there.
willing to write grant proposals for us, for a percentage of the grant if it was funded. Made sense to me,
I wondered about that, whether that was.
you know?
is that a legit, is that something that's,
I don't know.
Don't I?
You would be a
it
consultant.
seems too good to be,
It was a town resident.
I don't know if that's violates any state laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might. We'd have to think about that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think getting somebody through the TA process, I mean, as you said, to the extent that we have, and it's mentioned up here, to the extent that we have an inclusionary bylaw that is, not worth the paper it's written on, how do we get somebody to help us rewrite it the right way? Obviously, there's got to be some towns that have been enacted
Well,
an
is-
inclusionary bylaw, no?
Does it really need to be rewritten a certain way, or is it just doesn't have sufficient teeth? In other words, the number just isn't right.
Oh, well, okay. I mean, I guess I understood that it wasn't
There's-
practical to implement how it was written, but maybe that's not right, so,
There's too much wrong with it.
yeah.
Well,
And even Larry said that before he retired, they tried to get people to come out to communities from their staff to help people with it. No, but they didn't want any part of it because of how convoluted it is.
Can
So
you give
it's-
an example of what,
yeah.
anything offhand,
I
what's wrong with it?
can't.
Yeah,
It's just
no.
a myriad of things.
Yeah,
So it's not simply a matter of 10 is too big, and if we made it 4,
There's all the other, you got to read it sometime to show about the medium incomes here and there's percentages and all kinds of.
so now you need to
stats
expend
going on.
town resources in order to administer, to manage, and to be able to identify, who's available to, or what the numbers need to be, or who the people that can live there are.
So, yeah, I'm confused or ignorant, because I thought it was simply, the process when it started was, the target was 5, there was a lot of pushback about 5, and so it went to 10, and what we have since then are a bunch of units, bunch of developments with 9. So it's, that's my understanding of history. So it seems very simplistic that it was just a matter of numbers, and if you went to 4, but now what I'm learning is that it's also, there's some devil in the details. It's not simply the you know, it's not simply economic, and we're working around the number of 10 in building 9. And so if we want affordable housing, we make it 4, and it's a lot less viable to build 5, so therefore you get more affordable units. There's more to it, is what I'm hearing.
There is
The
more
number
to
is
it,
almost
yeah.
irrelevant. It sounds like
Try this, okay, so forget the numbers. Pretend that we had a developer come in and say, we'll base it on the 9, and he or she said, let's do the 10th, and then
Yeah,
it's going to be affordable.
let's build 12.
So they bring in somebody whose income, family of, 4, 2 adults, 2 children, come in and they meet the income level, and then their income, which does happen, goes up. The wife goes off and gets her degree, and she is able to increase the household income, and something else happens that they make more money. Are they going to have to move?
But isn't that a
works?
common problem of any affordable?
Yes.
So I
And
don't
that's,
see-
I think, what Larry was telling us, that it was, don't touch it. That was my interpretation of it.
The constructing of it and going that far is a small piece to it. Then the management of it and the overseeing of it is a nightmare.
But if that were the case, then it would be a nightmare in every town, in every development, and yet towns
Exactly
do
what they were
this.
saying.
I don't think there's a lot of communities in Massachusetts by the statistics I read, percentage-wise, that have a viable plan going. There's more that don't.
So they're doing their affordable housing through different means than through a bylaw that restricts development.
Probably.
We'll go to
Something
that
else.
conference and find
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and
What
if,
What if we take a different approach? Some communities have economic development committees or agencies that are promoting certain redevelopment or certain development of industrial area or commercial area that they really want to see developed. So what they do is they buy the land, right, or they own land, and they develop the infrastructure in order to promote that to be the case. Well, what if we, as the town, take a similar approach to a housing standpoint, where we develop the roadway and then everything from, create a public right-of-way. Everything outside of the right-of-way is a developer-driven.
Right, so the way some developments get built is just that way. The town buys some land,
Yeah,
and then they put out an RFP
right.
for a developer to come in and create, and within that RFP, you set up the boundaries for what you're looking for as far
Right.
as what's affordable. So that seems, but what's contingent on making that work is maybe you need infrastructure, maybe you don't, and you certainly need land. And do we have land? I mean, we have over $300,000 potentially in funds to buy land, but is there land to buy?
Trying to think of where.
Well, let's think about this just big picture, right? As I recall, years ago, I heard that the Southampton was getting funds towards housing, towards affordable housing. Is there anything that stipulates what those dollars, like for example, I know that, let's say 5 years ago, the town had $250,000 or something like that. I don't know if that's still the
You
case.
say, what's 360?
Now,
360 now. I guess the point is there anything that stipulates what that could be used towards? So what's stopping us from finding a parcel that the town can buy, right? And let's just, I don't know what the numbers are going to be, but just hypothetically, you buy some land that costs $200,000 and it's X amount of acres, and the town promotes development to occur at this location. Now, we put on RFP, we get developers that come in and, they're responsible from the property line out or from the right-of-way line out. What's stopping us from using CPA funds or housing funds for that type of development?
So
I
you're
don't-
controlling your own destiny.
right, I don't know that anything is.
yeah, I'm not sure that
Okay.
anything is. I mean, I think CPC basically waits for anybody to come to them, so they're not going to initiate it, but I know Virginia had said it could also be rental, it didn't have to be purchased, so we could find units to be rental units as well.
And
Again,
I'm
I think
wondering
it's
whether there was an
managed.
error in the past, but rental units do count towards your affordable housing.
I believe so.
I thought that only owned units did, but
I don't think so. I think other towns have used the rental
Yeah.
model, and I think that does count. Yeah.
So it's the 40B.
Correct, I think so. I think so,
No,
yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I was in error previously,
Yeah.
but it had to be others.
So are you suggesting that the town buy the property, put an RFP, basically give the property to the developer
No.
as their incentive for doing it
Right.
at an affordable?
You create the infrastructure to get there, and then what they do beyond the property line is within the confines of your RFP.
Okay.
Right.
So the
That's
town-
always been an option. It's just,
It seems like a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, there were properties that we own that are
Sitting.
vacant properties, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
we don't
But
have
what's
to buy
stopping-
anything.
Right, but what's stopping, here's the thing, I guess.
So why haven't we gone that route?
Why
What's
haven't-
stopping us? Do
Right, but
something.
it's not like we don't have infrastructure or quasi-infrastructure. I don't know what the answer is. I guess I haven't looked at it from the big picture, but I guess,
so I speculate the reason it's maybe not such low-lying fruit is, as a developer, in order to make money, in addition, to the land, you're not having to buy the land, you're going to have to make enough on the units.
right, so that's where rentals probably come in, right? Or,
Well, then you have to administer the rentals, which you could get help with a
Somebody
neighboring housing
Or the
housing
owner of,
authority.
who owns the rental units, the developer or the town?
whatever the town sees fit,
Who owns the land?
the town.
In the case of
Town
this one in
would own it,
Amherst,
they
the
give it to
community
the
development
developer.
owns it.
Right.
You can set up a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. I mean, if that's something that you want to do.
So that's where we had one of our housing authority meetings, we had someone come in from Hilltown CDC, and they would be interested in helping, looking at something like you're
That's
describing.
like that
So that's one of the areas we've kind of been looking at. But it involves obtaining some land.
So, Paul, is this a possible DLTA project for a very good, PVPC planner that could take all of these ideas, put them together, and come up with a truly, call it a low-hanging fruit that we could possibly grab? And
I don't doubt it, but it's, how far are they going to go with it before, again, they cut it off and leave you hanging?
a lot further than this
You know,
discussion.
Leave that fruit hanging.
But the problem is you've got to get the whole town to buy into this.
You could start
Well,
with
that's-
Yeah.
That becomes what I
That's a
think
challenge
sometimes the
sometimes, too.
barrier
Right.
is. And that's why we get so far and then.
Well,
Yeah.
that is a Southampton issue, because a lot of things have happened and
So,
they're good ideas
so
that
can we
don't
just
pass.
move, so there's a whole lot, there's a slew of other items that
Yeah.
are
What happened?
after this section that talk about mixed use,
Yeah.
talk about other components that
Right.
kind of tie into this as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah, the last one,
I guess we can talk about this all night, but
right. So they purchase existing single-family homes or convert homes into affordable units for mixed use. I mean,
So-
those are other ideas that were in the master plan that we thought were probably somehow the most likely and logical ideas and the most practical out of what we were reading in here. Anyway.
so here's just,
Well,
I'm gonna stand up and I like maps, so. I'm gonna
Go
come
for
up here. So, we know what, sewer comes down to here, we know that there's mostly commercial, I'm looking at the right part of town, right here actually, I'm sorry. Where's Woodtown? Right here. Yeah, because there's True Heart right here, so Big Y's right here, you have all the wetlands. Obviously, we know that, I'm just speaking hypothetically here. We know that there is a sewer line that runs, okay? We also know one of the things that
It runs down Coleman, is that right, or no?
it actually runs down the Greenway in Easthampton.
Okay.
So in the old railway right-of-way, it's also there, from my understanding. So, just thinking out loud here. There are zoning opportunities potentially that could be incorporated into mixed use in this area. If you're talking 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet of extension, obviously you need to have some kind of pump station or something to convey sewer into Easthampton if you were looking to go that route. Or potentially tying into the sewer that's in the bike path area here. Conversely, on the other side of town, you have the Westfield line. I think their sewer only ends here. So I guess the question is, I'm sorry, their sewer ends around here. The question is, do we look to provide mixed use opportunities in these areas? Because right now there's, industrial space and some parcels are looking for zone changing. Do we work with somebody to identify these potential parcels in these areas of a stone's throw and use what's available
Because
to
you're
us?
thinking if there's other large pieces of land outside of the infrastructure, that there's insufficient perk potential for standalone affordable units.
Right, so you're just trying to create the infrastructure, so if you build it, they will poop and come, I guess, into the system. The point is, you can create a whole lot in that area by promoting some sort of
Infrastructure certainly makes it easier.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, is there no viable way to buy the land, put it on an RFP, and have a half a dozen units built on 5 acres, because it's all perkable?
So here's the cost analysis that I'm thinking about long term is, 5 units versus 50, right? Now we start talking about scalable benefit that.
And that's what makes often these, to an RFP and a developer attractive. You're right, it's all about scale.
Right.
Your thought about the Easthampton makes more sense to me than the Westfield line, because you've got grocery stores, you've got services right there. And the idea of the smart growth district that we worked on years ago with PVPC was to have
That
the
access.
mixed use components, especially the residential ones, have close proximity to these type of services so they can walk to them.
Here's the potential that I see, and I'm thinking, I'm not a developer, but I'm looking at what's already there. So let's take the north side of town, particularly where you have the Red Rock shops and what's there. What do you have? You have a gym, you have a hair salon, you have a shopping.
You have an urgent care center.
You have an urgent care
a
center.
big supermarket.
So here's where I'm going.
Your pot shop.
You have one half of your mixed use potential right there already, right? If I'm a developer and there's an opportunity to create a residential development in here somehow that the town promotes, well, that's almost like a small little
There's an auto parts
village, and and you have an auto parts store,
Yeah. And we have no idea
That's
what's
what we
coming
did.
into the Peoples. There's all sorts of rumors about that one right now.
Right, but the point I'm trying to make is you have an area of town that is already
Got
on the commercial side of things, right?
part of the mixed use already there.
Part of your mixed use. So
Yeah.
is there something that we could do to promote the?
Doesn't the town own the property behind
The Red
the
Rock
auto
shop.
parts store?
The Red Rock shop.
Where
Yeah.
the
I don't
barn
think
is
so.
there, or?
Well, they did, because
On
they
Coleman?
took something in lieu of back taxes, right? Wasn't there
On
a
Coleman
small-
Road,
Yeah,
kind of
Coleman
across from
Road.
the Verizon place? I
Yes, isn't that?
Possibly, I don't know. But once again, this is someone that's familiar with the.
Yeah, I don't know what the land is back there. I mean, that'd be ideal to have something.
part of
Yeah,
It's
is that
wetland.
corner parcel available
I'll just fill them in. We'll replicate them elsewhere.
Thank
though? Next to O'Reilly's?
Right behind,
Spring
right, yeah,
Dry.
right, okay, right next to our
Corner
road.
of Coleman? Isn't that?
That might be a
available?
separate parcel, that might be.
That's
that might be.
available.
Yeah.
So-
That meets all the criteria that we're talking about, for that location anyway. I mean, because that's one of the things you have to do, is what we're looking, where, is it available, or
Yeah.
is there space
Yeah.
that either the town owns or can buy in these areas?
Let me say, we can look at
Talking about that are adjacent
Yeah.
to Westfield. and-
But it's going to require a zoning change too, because it's all zoned commercial.
Right,
Don't worry
But
about
it's
that.
also a valuable piece of property, so you're buying something in a commercial district right on the corner. I would think that's going to be
Well-
a pretty expensive piece to
But if
buy.
you-
But I'm not suggesting the town buys it. I guess what I'm trying to say is the town promotes, one way or another, a residential component. If we're really concerned about the affordable housing, and, you know, one of our goals is, you know, mixed use, maybe this is something that we somehow promote. And I don't know,
How would you get your?
I don't know how to get there. I mean, I guess
How would
that's,
you get your affordable component out of that, though, if it's, you know, what's going to guarantee that they're not going to make it market
well,
rate?
you can deed it.
Yeah.
Well, that is where zoning would come in, you know, maybe with an overlay district or something. I mean, yes.
Well, I think that's more of a incentive-driven opportunity that would be somewhat deeded or somewhat agreed upon the parties, right? So if the town's offering some tax breaks, some,
I was going to say, incentive rate is an easier sell than forcing,
right.
Yeah.
So one of the big things in the world of economics in the state are you know, district diffs, so district, oh man, I'm blanking out right now. District, something financing, district.
improvement finance,
In district
infrastructure financing.
No, it's improvement, district
Well, what are the letters?
DIF or TIFs or tax
No, tax
increments.
Increment.
Tax.
Tax, yes.
Something from-
Tax increment.
Yes.
It's 815, TIFs and diffs.
Yeah.
So they're different, right? So taxes are more for, the TIFs are more for the business owners and the diffs are more for the property owners.
Right, yeah.
So with the diffs, with those district opportunities, you basically guarantee the property owner is going to receive what, tax incentives?
Right.
Tax breaks in lieu of,
So like your first year, your tax rate is maybe 20% of what it is, and then the next year it's 40%,
Right.
and it goes up to
But-
100% over 5 years.
right, but that goes against a potential bond that the town might take, for example, to
Make
fund
up the
these.
difference.
Right.
Correct, to make it the difference. So Easthampton's looking for that right now at, if you guys know where One Ferry is, they're, you know, they got a MassWorks grant application that was funded for, whatever, 2.5 million or whatever it is. And then the building proponent is remodeling the old,
The factory that's there.
Yeah, that
the old mill building, right?
Yeah.
Right, but then he needs funds, right? So he can't fund all of it by himself, so he's also getting, setting up a DIF, a district improvement something fund.
Would there be any way to encourage the owner of the Red Rock shops to build up?
Well, that's how, yes, there is some way to, yes, there is an opportunity to do
Interesting
that.
thought.
It's a good
Right,
idea.
it is a good idea. 'Cause
Right.
You build residential on top.
Right,
Mixed use.
right. So that's where the mixed use component comes in. Now, I don't know if they want to go up or raise and start over again, but I don't know.
Go
what the-
behind and do it from the back.
Well, the other opportunity is too that, I'm just thinking out loud, is that there's a lot of pavement there, right?
Yeah.
So is it underutilized? I don't know. Anyhow,
It's not usually
that's not for us to
full
figure out right now. So
Yeah.
it's an idea, it's
Yeah.
something to,
No, it's good ideas. I mean, I think there's,
So how do we get to the next step
Yeah.
on this? Is this a case of hiring a professional planner to, would you think, to
I would
know what's going on in the state, know the laws, know what
Yeah.
diffs mean, sorry,
yeah.
to, you know.
well, I know what it means, I don't know what the acronym,
I know,
That's fine.
joking.
No, I think to the extent we could do something through, you know, the TA possibilities through PVPC, at least to start there. I mean,
Yes.
like you said, we don't know.
financing.
There we go. How long it might,
That's what they
how far it
have.
might take us or how long it might last, but it would at least get some motivation going that maybe if the town saw that there was something worthwhile coming of this, that maybe we could keep on pushing for some funding elsewhere too.
You
I
could
mean,
get it started with that, and then when the funding stopped for that, then you could hire PVPC on a consulting basis to continue on with
To
it.
continue.
But let me just ask this question. Before we go there and do all this preliminary work, do we need agreement from the people in town that this is something they want to do, that we're going to do? I mean,
Well, then
because
what's the
we
point
could go
of
so
us
far.
having this?
I know, but we could go so far.
Well, why do we have to go before the town? If it meets zoning requirements, if it's in the master plan,
It was approved at town meeting, the master plan.
Master plan was adopted at town meeting.
Okay.
Well, I guess, can you rephrase what you were asking?
I guess what I'm saying, we go so far to make this plan, you know, to get the right combination of people working on it so that it could become a reality. We don't have to go back to town meeting to get approval to actually start the work, or do we?
So the
I
question
just-
is, should we or do we have to?
Do we have
Because
to? Or maybe a little bit
I
of
think that we
both.
have to. If we're not changing any zoning, or we're not doing anything like that, then legally, we do not have to. Whether we should gauge the town's interest is a separate question.
Might be a
But
better.
if the town,
my opinion.
also if the town is going to buy land, you have to go
Yeah.
and get the town
Well-
approval. And my recollection is that a
Probably
select
funding
board
it, we
member
need to get approval on it.
has objected to the town being a landlord.
Well, it doesn't have to be a landlord.
That was the feedback we got in the housing authority, is that, again, it was risky being a landlord.
but wait a minute,
other
you're saying
towns
the
do it.
town is not the landlord, they don't own the land.
But the town can be
Trust.
a.
It could be a separate trust.
Well, no, not even there. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, why can't the town be providing incentives for?
Would that have to go before town meeting to provide
Well,
incentives?
that has to be, I think, a town select board action, and I think it has to be approved by the state Department of Revenue as well, but that's another issue. But
Okay.
that's.
I mean, I just don't want to go down this
Yeah.
path and then find out.
Yeah.
we-
Well, that's why we're gonna consult and tell
They're
us.
going to say no.
Well, it would seem to me that you
That's-
could- it would seem to me that we could aim for the planning
This
process.
sounds really good.
You know, aim for the planning process, and then as we're seeing how that's developing, and we think that we really do have something here to be able to try and take a next step, then probably as best practice, probably would be a good
So-
idea to have a hearing or something to inform the residents about
Well,
where we're trying to
this-
get.
this-
So before you even go down there, I think it might be in our best interest to have someone that understands the limitations of what we can do
Yeah,
going forward and what's out there available. Because frankly, you know, knowing some town residents, people might be against this, right? And it's like, well, why is the town wasting, you know, money on this potential? It's like,
Right.
well, what are we trying to get out of this, right? So I think, you know, for us to be educated in the potential pitfalls as well as what steps we need to take to go forward, it would be quite beneficial for all of us.
Right, we're finding similar on the housing authority as a volunteer board. The more we learn, it's like a rabbit hole, the more we know we don't know.
Right.
So it just keeps expanding what we don't know, and we're very much feeling we need to know a lot more.
And every
before-
one of you is a volunteer and has another job or is
Sure.
trying to be retired
Yeah.
or something.
Right. So, I don't want to take us too long here. Can we just flip to the second one, and then just to show you what the economic development one, because some of that ties right in, and we've been talking about infrastructure. I think a lot of that, in terms of the growth of town, the issue had been really related to the infrastructure. So the notion on the sewer system, the whole issue on alternative, so the wastewater treatment options, the telecommunication options, and as Francine said, we've had a couple of presentations at Select Board. Yeah, one was from the folks in Westfield, the Hoya,
Power and
sorry,
gas.
Westfield Gas and Electric, right? They're doing a lot of the
Fiber.
the fiber work in the hill towns, especially on the
They're doing
telecommunications
Easthampton,
side.
too.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And so they came and talked to us. It was more informational. I mean, it was just to find
Creating a
out.
town,
Right,
telecom.
Exactly,
Right.
a town, what's it called, a municipal light district or something like
Municipal,
that. And so, you know, it's not cheap. It was like around $4 million, I think is what he quoted to
4.4.
us. It's not, you know, something that happens overnight because you've got to, you know, put a whole lot of work into it. But just to say that we've started to at least inform ourselves as a select board about some options here, and then trying to talk about, you know, how does this all, you know, tie together? And so this too, it kind of it, dovetails nicely in a way with the housing one, because some of this, again, talked about, looking at
Related.
some of the zoning regulations and stuff, and how that, related to housing, but the mixed-use overlay district, for example, and, what would be the standards for mixed-use developments. I mean, I don't know offhand. I mean, we've got some mixed-use developments, I think, in town, right up across from the old JP's, right? Where the quilt shop is now, right? There's apartments on top of that, if I'm not wrong. So that would be, one that's in town. There's one, I think, where the Robert Floyd's Gallery is. That's a mixed use,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's people that live
apartments up
upstairs there.
Yes.
So, I mean, so we've got a few small examples in town. It's not like they're extensive, but we've, to find out, how we could, even take those on a smaller scale and expand those somehow. I mean, not them, but I mean, use that example and
Idea, yeah.
do something. So I don't know if somehow, if we were to go for the idea of a TA person, that we would have somebody that could kind of help in both of these areas, because I think that's the challenge, where, we'd like to be able to bring in more economic development into town, and, every time that idea starts, then it's like, well, but we don't have, the infrastructure. And so that's why we went to this small sewer system approach, to say, well, maybe we don't have to put sewer down the entire length of Route 10, because we can't possibly do that, but, what is feasible in certain areas? If we could identify areas of town that would be appropriate, that we want to see, whether it's affordable housing or commercial growth or whatever it might be, that we could then isolate and selectively put in this limited, as it was explained to us anyway, this limited infrastructure to allow for these kinds of things to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the challenge, as it was maybe with even open space, of identifying what are the properties in town that are important, that we want to try and preserve from open space perspective, but also what are the parts of town where we think, are really conducive to commercial activity, as opposed to, whether it's, mixed use or whatever other kinds of things we're doing. And I think that's where our challenge is like, how do we go about really identifying those, other
Almost
than...
like a matrix.
Yeah, and I don't know, if you guys have been dealing with open space. I mean, you've been working on trying to develop some sort of a list, right, through whatever we know the assessors has, right, in terms of what's in chapter lands and things like that. But at least you've got an idea of what's in chapter lands and what might be coming someday out of chapter land that might be something that would be possible, or other people that might be willing to donate land or whatever, whereas I don't know that we, have gotten any
Seems to me, though,
way in that.
and you brought up open space, there are people in town that are like, we don't need any more open spaces. But if we were to get some kind of very viable plan that addressed housing as well as economic development, then there would be action moving forward to say, we're not just sitting around allowing a developer to say, well, here's a nice lot, I think I'd like to build something here. We're doing it based on a plan of some kind. It seems to me that we
And
could...
it should benefit the town, and I mean,
Yes.
if we had more affordable housing, we'd probably be eligible for more other types of funding, in
That's
addition
right.
to the economic development that
Then we
we
would
bring
need a
by having
professional grant writer.
residents, and,
Yeah, so I mean, to me, I think we would, these two kind of go together. I don't see how we, separate economic development out by itself without, combining some of these other areas. But, so where do we, without spending a whole lot of time, what do we think? Do we kind of agree that these are big chunks of things that we'd like to see and try to do something about? But other than maybe trying to see if we can suggest some concrete actions from these that we could help to feed into a proposal for the DLTA grant? Does that sound like a first activity to do, like next Wednesday?
Any professional advice you can get
would be worthwhile, I think,
Very
right?
much so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you guys have mentioned this Larry Smith. I gather he's helped you guys quite a bit over time
But he's
retired apparently, or
working for us.
Uh-huh.
He's cherry picking what he wants to do these days.
Uh-huh.
Right now, he's in Mexico for 3 months.
Okay.
But I mean, PVPC, he's charging just like they're charging.
Yeah.
An hourly rate.
So he's a private person, he's not PVPC, right? Yeah, okay.
I think he's enjoying his pina coladas right now.
Yeah, good for him.
But
Yeah,
Ken Comia is our person that works with us now at a
Okay.
PVPC.
Okay.
But he wouldn't necessarily be the person probably on the DLTA.
Yeah.
It would be someone else.
Somebody else that would do that, yeah. Okay. So what's anybody's thoughts? What do we want to, how do we make this go from here? I mean, I'm not assuming that we would have right away anyway another joint meeting. I think this was a good start, and I really appreciate everybody taking your time to to come and be here tonight. I think Thursday night is not a normal meeting for any of us, so I really do appreciate everybody changing their schedules around and being here, because I think it was important to have this first effort, at least, to communicate and,
And make sure that we're all, I mean, I
Well,
thought there were great ideas.
yeah, no, I didn't like it.
Tonight.
Going
I learned
forward, if
something.
you want to get on our agenda,
You could come to them.
you all can come, or you
Sure.
send a representative
Yeah,
or
we could do that.
something.
Yeah,
I'd like the board, the entire board, most of the time we can get a quorum together. Sometimes we have
yeah,
And
all
maybe-
5 of us where, you've got 3 other people that can weigh in on
yeah,
stuff too.
sure.
And if it's something that we can implement zone-wise for zone changes,
Uh-huh,
again,
yeah.
propose it to the select board, then we'll get a public hearing going, and
Yeah.
we'll try to do what we can to...
Can you just mention some of the kinds of zoning changes you're working on? And what,
We're going right from page 1 right through,
and this is in the zoning bylaws ones? Yeah.
right up.
Not for our bylaws.
What have we
No.
got? 19, we've got 19 sections, and I think we're up to 9. We're working on
And how many
like
years has
9 or
that been?
10.
Yeah.
And the key to it is how we're going to present it after it's all
Yeah.
put together and come to public hearing, because
Sure.
there was a great amount of work done years ago by PVPC, it was before my time,
Uh-huh.
where it got started and town meeting shut it down, and all that work went for naught.
Wow.
And so it's very, because, probably would be a lengthy meeting, because there's certain parts of it where someone would want to make an amendment or
Yeah.
be opposed to something.
Yes.
Hopefully you can shake that out in a public hearing, but it doesn't always happen that way, because
Correct.
people that don't go to public hearing will go to town meeting and say, well, geez, I don't like that. And get up
Exactly. And then you spend time
take a vote.
wordsmithing on things,
Then you
yeah.
have to have amendments, and,
Yeah.
it could go on forever.
No, we have, unfortunately, we both have experience with this, because at the upcoming special town meeting, we've got probably 10 or so general bylaws that we worked on revisions on the bylaw committee, that will be coming up on
So it'll be
on the
interesting
warrant.
to see, watch how that goes and kind of
A
tell us
couple of
what
them
to
could be
expect.
a little
and everything
contentious,
else,
the others
yes.
shouldn't be that, but you never know what to expect, so I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
No, it's going through them from page 1 to
Yeah.
section 1 to 19, and adding in language to bring it up to date, because
Right.
it's been, what, 20, 30 years,
Sure,
something
yeah,
like that?
yeah. And clarifying things, the language, that doesn't make any sense anymore,
Some of it's
anyway.
pretty
Yeah.
minuscule, it's like
Yeah.
details.
Oh,
It's-
yeah, no, I would believe
Yeah,
it.
yours, yeah, I'm sure yours
Much
is
more detailed than what we've
detailed
gone through,
what
but
we're dealing
nonetheless,
with, but
I can
still,
relate to it.
the idea is the same thing. and
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
So,
So I'm hearing next steps are essentially on these 2 chapters.
Yep.
We've recognized some barriers. One of the barriers is we don't have a professional staff, we don't have the knowledge base, we don't have the time to go through and try to bring together the whole approach to making a proposal for some kind of an affordable housing option, action that the town could take, that could go to town meeting, to agree to if we have to go to town meeting, and that what we need is a professional person to do this.
Someone to help
And that
flush
we
all
have
this
this
out.
opportunity to apply for a DLTA. How much money is that, do you know? Yeah, okay.
There wasn't an amount assigned to the contract
yeah.
yet. Paul, question for you. Should someone in the interim here make contact with the Easthampton, either planning board or the DPW, the sewer department, to find out if they are willing to buy sewerage from Southampton along that...
I was thinking about that, what's their capacity, right? Water-wise, I know their water capacity is fine. They have the potential for additional services in our town. From the sewer, I don't know.
Because the
That's
sewer
something-
right now,
I know who to call. I can reach out to
but I
this
think the
person.
sewer goes,
Doesn't it go to the car wash?
it goes to the car wash, yeah.
It stops there,
Car
yeah.
wash.
Yeah, yeah.
So it doesn't go to Pooza, it doesn't go to Pure Food, it goes to the car wash?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Just to the car wash.
And Big Y has their own,
No, I think Big White tied in because their system failed, from what I understand.
But would we have to involve our water commission at all in this? Okay. I know they have nothing to do with the sewage, but when you're talking about water to the area
Just-
for the purpose
Just to
of
find out
sewage.
what and how far they'd be willing to go.
Well, it's a matter of gallons per day that they're looking to increase, right? I'm not going to get into the weeds, but there's certain expansion that they can do without triggering some sort of additional state action per se. Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act might be triggered if state funds are used to increase sewage generated by a potential development that exceeds, let's say, 200,000 gallons per day, which is a significant amount. The point I'm making is it goes beyond just us and Easthampton. It might be a state action that we might have to potentially have a hurdle with if we take state funds to be promoting or conveying sewer to Easthampton.
But we wouldn't necessarily be talking about extending the line farther down Route 10. We would be talking about, like, if we were able to figure out some
Expanding
land
the
beyond
capacity.
the Red Rock, behind the Red Rock or that area, Coleman Road area, for example, adding into the existing sewer system, not continuing to bring it down, because,
Or expanding it.
I mean, well, farther down, we run into,
Well,
running further down Route 10. I mean, as you head toward the river, you've got commercial property on the right-hand side, it's all zoned, right, commercial.
right, so you'd be expanding the sewage.
So what's going to happen for that? For example, like, that's all zoned commercial now, those vacant lots.
There's some trouble down there because of the wetland,
I was gonna say the wet-
floodplain.
Yeah,
You know, there's depths of lots there that prevent a lot of
yeah.
development there. Somebody'd have to be very creative. You know, the credit union had to jump through a lot of hoops
Oh,
there to
did
get
they?
in there. So some of those properties that are with the signs up zone commercial, they
Right.
are, but on the same
Yeah.
token,
Pretty close to the river, that's
it's
why.
pretty
Undevelopable
creative to do
commercial
something
land.
with it, yeah.
Yeah, but would if somebody were to do that, though, that would have to have the sewer system, or no?
Would help for commercial.
Yeah, yeah,
Or mixed use, whatever.
well, whatever, yeah, so,
Well, that would be one of the first questions to determine then, is whether Easthampton will even, or what they will offer, because
Yeah.
if all this talk would be for naught if Easthampton can't or won't
Yeah,
take an
yes.
interest in.
That's right.
yeah.
Do you have a person
Yes.
in mind that you could contact?
I know that's the very person that would know how to answer that
Could
question.
you email that person at 11 p.m. at night, you know? That's when they're really-
I'll text him right now.
Would you mind doing that on behalf of all of us, just to
Yes.
find out a little bit
Yes.
about what they're, I mean, just a first reaction, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly no commitments, but just a,
Great, thanks.
you know, God, no, that's absolutely impossible, or, yeah, well,
Right.
we could, you know, we
What's
could
the
think about that, or
parameters of
what
our
are, you
next
know,
steps?
what would be the,
There's been a lot of conversation that's gone into that area of town without even knowing whether it's
Is Big
viable.
Y tied into theirs, I wonder?
Yes. Their system failed several years ago, and they had to tie in. I think that spurred the extension.
Yeah.
So in terms of mixed use, this may be way pie in the sky, but I don't know who's going into the Peoples, what do they call it, Peebles, the department store. Could that be converted?
Yes, but it's.
I mean, who'd want to be next to a tractor supply?
No, that's.
Is that, no, seriously?
No, seriously, the thing is this, you would want to make it attractive, right?
Right.
So it's a matter of looking at a comprehensive retrofit or
Right.
modification of the area to make it attractive
Yeah.
for both, right? For your potential rentals or your, housing and your commercial side of things, right? What I'm trying to get at is, I'm thinking about, if I'm a developer, right, and I own Red Rock, I see the fact that there's such a significant cross-section of users in there from, you have a gym, you have a hair
Chinese
salon,
restaurant,
Chinese
you got a
restaurant,
jeweler,
potential R&D, right?
right?
So the point I'm going with this is, it makes his property even more attractive if he's able to have a captive audience or residents per se that will be creating a little village per se. I don't know how this would look, how this is potentially laying out, but the point is, you're halfway there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you promote a village, that brings in your mixed use.
Isn't the owner of that, the fellow that owns McKell's, isn't that the owner of Red Rock?
Oh, that's the same, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Same
yes.
person?
I'm asking.
The entire shops? Yeah.
He owned
That's the
what used to be
Opa
Red Rock
right?
Pizza years
Wasn't
ago.
that the Opa folks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that, okay.
The last name is Rizzo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rizzo's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
the Greek family there, right?
Right.
Exactly, and he's the one that owns McKell's. He used to own Opa Opa, and before it was Red Rock Pizza.
Right.
And it used to be,
That's right.
you guys who lived around here a long
That's
time, used to be Red Rock Drive-In.
Red Rock
Used to
Theater,
be a
way back.
theater.
The People's Complex, though, is tied into the Tractor Supply.
But-
Yeah,
It's all the same.
Who owns the
The
building?
landlord
The whole building?
probably is not going to be,
Yeah.
Highly incentivized to change
Yeah.
that.
I
Because
thought
really-
it would have made a great senior center.
Yeah,
furthermore, you're taking a commercial, is that on our side or Easthampton? No, that's on
it's our side,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're taking a commercial entity off the tax roll.
But there again, you could build up.
Yeah, but I doubt
It's
seriously
at the
that
same rate as residential.
There's no-
There's
yeah.
no more
Right.
revenue.
No, but I mean, when it comes to jobs and whatever.
Right, you wouldn't be taking away, see, what I'm getting at is you wouldn't be taking away the commercial component, you would be adding on residential.
Well, but yeah,
Yeah.
you've got a ground floor probably, yeah, you're right, yeah.
But even, so we're all speaking hypothetically here.
Sure.
So this is where the.
We're all
once
pie in the
again,
sky here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is where the professional would help us
Right, yeah.
come up with some ideas in terms of,
Yeah.
yes, we can do this, we can look
Yeah.
at this, we can promote, we can create a district improvement financing opportunity that not only looks at the Red Rock, but goes across the street where the Big Y area could be potentially part of this district where, you know, for the next 10 years, the town promotes tax dollars or takes tax dollars that would be going, you know, from these developments and maybe puts it into infrastructure. You know, I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, I'm just talking about it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know right now, the Tractor Supply People's used to be one big building, if I'm not wrong, right? That used to be one, that used to be
It used to
Ames,
be
had the
Ames,
entire,
or whatever it was,
the
yeah.
entire structure, and then it got divided into two, I think, right? The Tractor Supply and People's. No, the only rumors that were flying around the other night on social media are another gym or TJ Maxx, that's what I've heard. No, and that's not come officially before anybody that I know of, that's just floating in the wind. So wherever that started, I have no idea.
They're gonna move to the Tractor Supply.
So anyway, but yeah, good sense. So why don't we, let's not keep on going too long here, but let's agree that some of us can try to make the planning board meeting on Wednesday. I'll give that a whirl, I'll add that to my schedule. You meet at 7, is it? 7 on Wednesday, okay. And then maybe we can figure out a way, well, I'll circulate, because I hadn't, I think I gave it to Ed, but I've got a copy of it somewhere, the list that showed what the technical
Yes.
assistance grant has, what's eligible for it, and some things that they've funded in the past. I can maybe circulate that to the members of Master Plan so you can see that. We won't be able to deliberate on it, I guess, outside of open meeting, right?
It's 7 PM next week?
Next
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Cindy, I can probably
Here.
forward that to you and then you could send it out.
Downstairs, planning board's downstairs, yeah.
The list, you mean? The
Yeah.
DLTA thing? Sure. I'll forward it to this committee.
Yeah.
Sure.
We just have to make sure we don't end up making a quorum.
Right.
Well, we're just.
Well, go ahead and
it's
post it.
joint
Post it
meeting.
anyway. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll ask Mike to do that. yeah.
We could, we
Yeah.
could just post it as a
If
joint
you
meeting.
can make it, you can make it next
Yeah,
Wednesday
why don't we
night.
do that? That's not a bad idea.
I think this has been a fruitful meeting.
Yeah.
I really
No, I
do.
think-
Because
Joint meeting of
They
NPI.
had
And
so much
planning.
more, you had so much more substance to what we were talking
Yeah,
about.
I mean, it's,
Coming back to the fact that, we're kind of just facilitators, but you're the content people. It
yeah, in
makes-
terms of the technical background
makes a
stuff that
lot
we don't
more
have,
sense to
so we
me.
really appreciate
Yes,
that.
thank you.
So-
All right. I'm
Good,
gonna send you that.
Okay, yeah, so let's aim, we'll talk to Mike and see if we can post this as a joint meeting again, and then whoever can come on Wednesday, we can come and talk about that. So maybe we can just have a slot on the agenda to talk about.
Is yours Yahoo or iCloud?
I use Yahoo. I get iCloud too, but unfortunately, the town's started to use me as iCloud. It's Yahoo's my choice.
Okay, so with that, I think we have no no visiting public here, so we have no real open time for the public. We're going to postpone minutes of any of the meetings until our next regularly scheduled meeting. Let's go for the joint meeting on next Wednesday at 7 PM as a follow-up to
We
this.
probably won't get to you folks until probably 7:30, but we start
Yeah,
at
no, that's
7.
fine, that's fine, that's fine. So with that, shall we take a
I move to adjourn.
motion to adjourn? Yeah.
Second.
Second, everybody in favor?
Aye.
All right, so adjourned at about
you.
8. Thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Thanks, I heard
You
from
too.
Andy that you were going to have this comment.
I'll buy you cookies, I'll make your cookies
I
any
need to
day.
be better informed before I go to the planning board to ask. We don't know what we want to ask. So this actually created a platform that gets some questions started. There's so much to learn.
Okay.
You know what, you could
Well, one thing we realize is
run the whole housing committee and
we're
do
going to go to the planning board
Did you
until
turn
we
it
have
off?
our act together, know what we're going to ask for. So this is kind of making that happen.
Here.
Nothing.